In Austria, coalition talks to form a new government led by the far-right Freedom Party have collapsed more than 4 months after the election. Now, Freedom Party leader Herbert Kickl has informed Austria's president that talks with the Conservatives were unsuccessful. The far-right party won September's election, but wasn't initially tasked with leading coalition talks because other parties refused to work with it. Last month, the Freedom Party did receive a mandate to form a government after conservative-led talks collapsed. All right, for more, I want to bring in journalist John Cummins now. He's in Vienna. John, so what happens now? Is Austria headed for new elections?
Well, we've just had the Austrian President Alexander van der Bellen giving a live TV address here to the nation, and he laid out 4 options that are now possible. He said there could be another coalition. If other parties can find a way to work together, they could potentially take over as a new government. There could also be a technocratic government installed. That's another option. There could be a minority government, say, for example, the conservative FLP, the People's Party here, supported by various other parties in parliament. Or the 4th option, of course, is there could be fresh elections. So what we know for sure is that the president has invited the leaders of the political parties for more talks in the coming days. He's going to assess the situation with them, and then presumably he'll come to some kind of understanding or arrangement or decision on what the way forward is from here.
And the Freedom Party is at the center of this political dilemma. For our viewers, remind us, what does the Freedom Party stand for?
Well, the Freedom Party, of course, is a classic far-right party. It's anti-immigrant, it's anti-EU in many ways. It also has had traditionally ties to Russia as well. Of course, it has a very strong anti-war in Ukraine stance. And of course, the other thing that we can't forget in all of this is that it's had a very difficult history with the Conservatives, with the UFLP as well. The two of them were in government together. They had a very acrimonious falling out in 2019 after the Ibiza scandal, where some senior members of the Freedom Party were caught on camera trying to sell political favors. So, these two parties have a lot of bad blood, essentially, and that is perhaps part of the reason why there was very much a lack of trust in these coalition negotiations and why they have eventually collapsed.
Here in Germany, the political parties that are not far right have created what is known as a firewall, agreeing to join forces wherever possible to keep the far right forces out of government. Is there this kind of firewall in Austria?
Not exactly, no. Before the election or during the election campaign, we had the centre-left Social Democrats, the Greens, and also the Liberal Neos party basically ruling out any kind of coalition with the Freedom Party. The Conservatives were a little different in that respect. Under the former Chancellor Karl Nehammer, they said quite clearly in the election campaign that they would not go into coalition with the Freedom Party under its present leader, Herbert Kickl. But that wasn't a blanket kind of refusal to go into coalition talks with the party. And in fact, what we saw was that Nehammer stepped aside so that these talks could then take place with Kickl. So there was not a similar situation to what you have in Germany, no. The Conservatives from the beginning were sitting on the fence in certain regards about whether they would cooperate with the Freedom Party or not. Although we had the other parties, as I said, clearly saying that they would not work with them.
This shift that we've seen in Austrian politics, many say it reflects a broader European trend of far-right parties making electoral gains. How does the collapse of these coalition talks, how does that impact the popularity of the far-right in Austria?
Well, that's a very hard question to answer because I guess it depends to some extent on who gets the blame for these coalition talks collapsing. And of course, both of the parties, the Freedom Party and the Conservatives, are trying to blame each other. What we do know is that the most recent opinion polls show the Freedom Party's support is actually increasing, and that if there was an election next week, that they would be the clear winners. They won around 28% of the vote in the elections back in September, but there was certainly at some stage there were opinion polls that were showing that they were heading up towards the high 30s in terms of their percentage. So Perhaps they will emerge as the winners from this. Perhaps if there were fresh elections, they will emerge even stronger than in September. But of course, it's very difficult to say at this moment. As I said, the Conservatives are very keen to paint the Freedom Party as being unable to compromise, as Mr. Kickl as being drunk on power, as having this Machtrausch. So it depends, I guess, to a certain extent, what the Austrian public believes, which narrative that they will end up believing out of all of this.
Journalist John Cummins with the latest on the political impasse in Austria tonight. John, thank you.